Welcome to our Dream to Rise podcast. This is Cynthia Concordia, your host.
Welcome to our Dream to Rise podcast. And I'm truly, I feel so much joy having with me here another person or another individual who has gone through so much also in life. But it's a blessing that we have her here. She is a certified trauma informed yoga instructor, somatic embodiment coach, and women's circle facilitator who empowers women to reconnect with their bodies and their inner wisdom. So, as a late diagnosed, what's this AUDHD?
So, yeah, autistic and ADHD. So ADHD. Yeah.
DHD individual and survivor of domestic violence, she knows firsthand what it takes to escape darkness, heal deeply, and reclaim joy. With a compassionate and down-to-earth approach, she guides transformative journeys through movement, breathing, and somatic practices, helping women rise beyond survival and step into their fullest untamed selves. Without further ado, I would just like to introduce you and welcome Kate. Kate Tataryn. Is that correct? How to
Yeah.
pronounce
Tataryn, that's
Tataryn?
correct. You got it right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Welcome, Kate. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm thrilled and honored to be a part of your podcast. So thank you so
It's an
much.
honor to have you here. By the way, Kate, where are you from? Where are you located?
So I am from Quesnel, BC, Canada.
Oh,
So
in Canada.
yeah, I'm in Canada. It's kind of cold here right now. We're right smack dab in the middle of winter.
Do you have snow? We're expecting snow tomorrow morning, tomorrow at 11.
We do have snow, not so much this year, but it's about minus 20 right now.
Oh
So
my, that's
yeah.
cold.
It is. It
Oh
is.
my. So where is that? Is that in the east, near East Coast or West or?
We're on the West Coast. I'm on the West Coast, and I'm in kind of the middle of the province. So yeah,
Oh, I
yeah,
see. I have a friend
yeah.
in Manitoba. I don't know if that is that far?
About three
Oh.
provinces away.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome. So let us start because I'm so excited to hear your story. But I would just like to ask you to tell something about yourself that brought you to where you are right now, why you're doing what you're doing.
I'm doing what I'm doing because I I wish that I had someone like me to help me go through what I went through. Um, I find that because I'm neurodiverse and I'm on the spectrum, I find that my brain works differently, and sometimes concepts I don't really understand some concepts. So I think I went through about 7 or 8 counselors until I found one who could actually help me.
No.
And it wasn't until he took like these kind of esoteric concepts of mental health and grounded them into actual practices that I was able to begin to heal, right? And so I wish I had someone who kind of thought outside the box, who is able to explain things to me in a way that I could understand and help me heal. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm here for.
Okay.
Drew me to
So
it.
what brought you to this situation? What happened? It would be nice if I know you have experienced a lot of adversities, traumas in life, and that led you, that journey, I'm sure, help you evolve and help you do what you're doing right now. Could you take us to that journey, please?
All right. So I grew up in a family that I thought was just normal, right? I thought everything that we did and how we acted was just kind of normal, everyday things, right? And I didn't realize that it wasn't. I didn't realize that I grew up in an abusive family until I actually met the counselor that helped me. Um, but it kind of shaped me into a person who was a people pleaser. I wanted people to like me. And so I tried to do anything and everything I could to get people to like me, right? I was lonely. I had really bad self-esteem. I had no self-worth. And so I ended up starting to date a guy who eventually ended up becoming my husband.
Mhm.
Um, he was the first real relationship that I ever had, and he he I thought he loved me, right? I thought that my whole world, he was my whole world. He asked me questions, he wanted to get to know me, and it was always about, hey, how are you doing? What are you doing? And we had these super awesome conversations about our beliefs and our values, and it felt like we had just kind of I clicked, like I found my person. And for the longest time, he was my person. Um, and when I was growing up, my parents were like, this is what abuse is like. If somebody hits you, that's abuse, and you should always walk away from that. Like, don't stay in a relationship like that, and we can help you with that, right? And I thought, okay, I know what abuse is. I honestly, as the relationship went on, um, and it's sometimes hard to speak of. I realized I woke up one night um, for quite a few years actually. He had been sexually assaulting me while I was sleeping, right? And I would wake up and things down there wouldn't be quite right, and I could never figure out why, like why, what's going on here, until one night um, we'd already had our first child. We had our second child. He was about a year old. And I woke up in the middle of the night and he was on the side of the bed and he was doing stuff to me. And I got really angry and, said, this can't happen again. You can't do this stuff to me. It's not okay. And everything, kind of went along and it did its thing. And, we went right back into being happily married, right? That started to spiral and it continued to get worse. And um, he brought a lot of manipulation into the relationship, a lot of psychological and emotional abuse. Whenever we'd have any kind of argument or fight, I'd bring up my concerns and say, hey, like this is not okay. We need to do something else. And he would always turn it around onto me. And I was the one who had to change. I was the bad guy, right? Um, we continued to have kids. We moved from here in BC into Fort McMurray, Alberta, and we had our third kid there. Um, and the sexual abuse continued to happen. And I kept giving him chances and chances, and you need to go to counseling, and this needs to stop. And if I changed what I was doing, because he said it was my fault that I was doing this, right? That I was not giving him enough sex, or I was not keeping the house the way it was supposed to be, or um, I wasn't fulfilling his needs, right? If I changed who I was, then that stuff would stop. And so we'd go through this cycle where I'd try to shift who and what I was, and things would change, but then they'd always come back. And so I remember a couple times, twice, I woke up. And again, the same kind of feelings down there. And I asked him, are you having sex with me while I'm sleeping? And he said, well, yeah, when you take your sleeping medication, because I wasn't sleeping, I had insomnia. When you were taking your sleeping medication, I would have sex with you because I knew you couldn't say no.
Oh my.
Yeah.
But
And
it was not him who suggested to have you that sleeping medication? Or
no, no, it
oh,
wasn't. I went to the doctor because I was not sleeping at night. And so the doctor said, well, hey, let's
so
prescribe you.
you don't feel anything
Yeah, I didn't feel anything. I,
that
he
time?
No, I didn't feel anything.
Oh,
He said that I was dead to the world.
oh
I
my.
didn't move,
Took
whatever.
advantage.
So he took advantage. He did whatever he wanted to with me. And, you know, because of the way and the family that I grew up with, um, I I told him, you can't do this kind of thing. It's just like rape. I
Yeah.
didn't actually consider what he had done to be actual rape, to be sexual assault. Um, and it wasn't until we started to go to a couples counselor because I'm like, this really has to stop. If you want to stay married to me, we have to work together here.
Mm-hmm.
He ended up turning the counselor against me.
Oh,
And so the counselor was then also blaming me for what had happened to me and what was going on in the marriage. And that sent me into a huge downward spiral. I stopped eating. I became anorexic. Um, I got extremely depressed. And so, like, it was hard to be a mother. Um, it was hard to be a wife. I didn't want to be alive.
yeah. Yes. And how many children do you have during that time? Four?
We have four children
Oh.
together. Yeah, we have four boys. And it got so bad with my mental health that one morning, one of my children woke up and I didn't hear him. I slept through the whole thing. And I woke up to a phone call, and it was because the police were outside my house. My child had gotten up, saw that their dad had gone to work, and decided that he wanted to go to work with dad. And so he, at 4 years old, got himself dressed, opened up the door, went trucking down the highway, and someone picked him up and called the police, and they came into our life, and Child Protective Services came into our life. And I know there's lots of people that have such bad experiences with Child Protective Services. They saved my life. They saved my life. They saved my children's life. And they helped me. They believed me. And so I started to finally able to get the actual help I needed. Um, they came in the house and looked around and did their assessment, and they're like, you know what, your children are loved, they're healthy, they're taken care of, but you need some help, so we're gonna help you.
Oh, that's nice. But I hope they didn't remove you from the
Oh,
kids. Uh,
no, they didn't. They were amazing. The worker that we had, she was amazing. And so I started to kind of slowly get out of there. I stayed with my husband um, because I I
you
didn't
still
have
stayed
anywhere
with
else
your
to go.
husband?
I still stayed with my husband. I still didn't realize that I was in an abusive relationship at that point. I thought this was just a problem that we could work through, right? And again, the people pleasing came into play there, right?
Yes.
So we ended up moving. I'm like, okay, well, Fort Mac, we need a different change, right? We ended up moving all across the country to Nova Scotia.
Mm-hmm.
One of my best friends was living there, and I wanted to I wanted to be with my friends again, right? And so we moved to Nova Scotia. He stayed in Fort McMurray working, and so he'd work for 3 weeks and he'd come home for a week. And I started we started a new life in Nova Scotia, and the more that I was away from him, the more that I started to actually find myself again, right? Like who the creative stuff. Like I loved costuming and I loved dressing up, and so we got involved in a reenacting group for 18th century, and we'd dress up and the kids would come with me, and they'd run around, and it was an amazing space to be in. In that time, Brad, my ex-husband, he yeah, ex-husband now, but he kept getting fired from his job. He'd get fired and then he'd find a new one, and he'd get fired and find a new one. And after I was telling my friend, one of my best friends there, he got fired from his job, and the bosses are out to get him again, and it was always the same excuse as to why he got fired. And my friend turned to me and she said, "Do you realize that this is the third time that he's gotten fired and it's the same excuse that you've told me? Are you sure
Mm.
that it's the bosses who are the problem? Because
Ah,
he's the common denominator
yeah.
than
Mhm.
all these people within all these jobs." And that hit me. That hit me like a freight train. um, and I started to think about our relationship. And every time we had gotten into a fight, it was always my fault. I was always the one who had to change. And I thought, why is it always my fault? Why am I always the one that has to change? And why does nothing ever change? And so she started to really get me thinking about my relationship and how I was being treated. And so 2 years after we moved to Nova Scotia, he came home for a week. And within that week, he'd accused me of cheating on him and that one of my children wasn't his.
What?
Um, because one of the children, he has glasses, right? And at that point, none of us needed glasses. Um, and I was blown away. Like, how could you even think this? And that was the point where I said that I think you need to leave. I don't want to be married to you anymore.
Mhm.
Um, we're done.
Good. So
So
after how many years of marriage were you able
13,
to make that decision?
13, 13 years we were together.
Oh,
13 years to make that decision. And and funny, actually,
uh,
today was the day that I told him that I was not going to be married to him anymore. February 10th, the
wow.
anniversary.
See,
Yes,
this is a special day for us.
this is a special day.
But now you're no longer crying, you're no longer feeling bad, feeling depressed because you're free, right?
Yes, yeah,
Being free from, imagine you've been jailed for how many years? 13 years. And
yeah.
how does it feel now being free?
It feels amazing. But honestly, it took a good 6, 7 years to even get to a place where I could see the light. Um, You know how when you talk about domestic violence and you hear about these women who break up with their abuser and then they go back and then they break up and they go back and they break up and go back. I was lucky enough to have my parents as a support system. And so when I left Brad, it took about 6 months to pack up our life, and I moved back to Quesnel into my parents' house with my children. And so they became a wall between me and Brad and it was for about 6, 7 years, I still thought it would be so much easier if I went back to him, because going through court and trying to get child support, and by then, the psychological and the emotional abuse ramped up, and um, the guilt of breaking up our family, right? Because
I
I was the one who initiated it, so I felt the majority of the guilt, and I was at fault for taking my children's dad away from them, and
oh,
I tried. It was hard. It was
yes, I
hard.
hear you. I hear you because I've been in that situation, and it was hard. Just like what you mentioned, you felt that you feel guilty of what happened, and that's one of the signs of a victim of domestic abuse is it's always your fault. You were the one who provoked him to do that. It was I think I should change. Oh, and then they would always blame you. That's why it got stuck to your mind that it's you who's always at fault. And I was like that. And you know what? Even though my sisters and my mom would always tell me, no, he is already abusing you. But then being a Catholic and a religion, and I made a vow during marriage that I will stick with him through thick and thin. I kept that marriage as well.
Yeah.
But it was not healthy for the children. When I saw the
No.
children, it impacted their studies, it impacted their self-worth, there was no self-esteem. It impacted their relationship with other people, with family and friends. And then their schoolwork, I told myself, I think I was actually still hoping when he was on restraining that I hope this family would come back together. But it didn't happen because he passed away during that time. But I'm glad that my children had learned to forgive. It's still there. It's still I think up to now that they're still having that problem of um I should not say they hate their dad. It's just that they could have lived a better life without experiencing all these things.
Yeah.
I should have made the decision ahead of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to do that though, like when I talked earlier about like I didn't realize that I was in an abusive relationship, growing up, my parents fought all the time, right? They would have screaming matches, and I thought that that was normal, right? I thought that being spanked was normal.
Yes, same
I
here.
thought that, being told like what is wrong with you? Why can't you get this? Like why don't you understand how to do this at like 10 years old, at 6 years old? Like I thought that that was a normal thing. And so when Brad was treating me that way too, like I thought, "Oh, this is a normal relationship."
Yeah.
It's
That- That's what
it's
I told also my kids. You know what? It's the behavior that was not good.
yeah,
He was raised like that, and he thought it was also normal.
yes, yeah,
I always tell them, don't hold grudges to your dad because he didn't know. He
yeah,
was raised like that.
yeah.
It was
And
hard.
It is hard. It is hard. Like I can look at my ex-husband and I can say, okay, I see how he grew up. I heard the way he grew up, right? But he and I can have empathy for him being that little boy and being in that space because there was a lot of sexual abuse in his family as well. So I
Oh,
can see how the um generational things come from one to the next, right? He brought it into our family, and
but you were able to stop that
yes,
the cycle, right? The continuous
yes,
cycle. I'm glad.
yeah, I stopped that. Um, and so yeah, when I moved in with my parents and I finally had that separation and I went through counselors and they're like, "Hey, did you know that what you experienced was actually emotional and psychological and sexual abuse?" And I was just like, no, no, I was in denial for
Yes,
so
yes,
long.
I agree.
Because, I was that girl in before that relationship that said, I'm never going to be in an abusive relationship. But I ended up in one because I didn't know what abuse looked like,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that's a hard place to be, and it's a hard place to accept, right?
So you mentioned about the turning point was when you made wherein you had that freedom, made the decision that was 13 years after. What was that again, that situation wherein you made that decision, enough is enough?
Yeah, it was like he came home from, his working, and we got into another fight, and it was me, and he blamed me and
Ah,
for
yes, for the
thought
kid,
that I was
no?
cheating on him,
Uh-huh,
right?
yes, uh-huh.
Um, it's I
Again,
didn't. All of the children are him,
uh-huh,
are his. But yeah, it was like I just couldn't believe it.
uh-huh,
I
yeah.
did end up finding out later that while I was in Nova Scotia and he was still working in Fort Mac, that he was actually seeing someone there. So
Mm.
he was putting his stuff onto me.
And put the blame on you rather than
Yeah,
saying
yeah,
his fault, being
yeah. I found that out years later.
um,
But even after I left him and I had that place to land, like it was still pretty dark, right? Like
mm.
how do you get over that grief? How do you get through it? And um,
So what did you do to help you overcome that dark
well,
time?
it I went to counselors.
Uh-huh, counselor. Uh-huh.
I saw quite a few counselors. And I tried to change the way I thought about stuff and my mindset, and lot of talk therapy, so much talk therapy. But I still could not ever get to a place where I felt like I was worth something, right? Like I still had really poor self-esteem. I continued to date. I had a few relationships, and they were all not great relationships. I was looking for someone to love me, and because I was lonely and people pleasing. And so a lot of those same habits I continued, right? Until I met Joe. Um, and that's when he started to bring in energy work. And it was something that I had never really considered, right? I've always had this spiritual outlook on life that, there is this higher power, and, Mother Nature has got all this energy that just runs through it. And balancing our how we live and show up. But when I was in traditional talk therapy, none of that was there. Someone would say to me, "Have you tried meditating?" Well, yes, I have, but my brain works a mile a minute, and I can't empty my head. I can't meditate because I can't find nothingness, right? Or have you tried grounding? Well, yeah, but what is grounding? Like, does that just mean going out onto the grass and putting your feet in the grass, right? So and they're like, well, you just ground yourself. So there was nothing concrete there. And so when I met Joe, um, he he brought energy work into it, and he's like, you don't have to empty your mind. Meditation isn't about emptying your mind. It's about finding presence with your thoughts, right? You've got all these thoughts that are coming in. Take a step back from that and just notice as they come in and as they come through, and what are they saying and what are you feeling within your body. Let yourself feel it, right? And so he he started he started the path to where I am right now.
So
And
are you now in a relationship with Joe?
no,
Oh
no,
no.
Joe was my counselor.
Oh, you're a counselor. I thought I thought you met the love of your life. So
No, Joe is my counselor. He was my brother's counselor, and my brother was raving about him, and I'm like, I need to see this guy. He
uh-huh.
sounds awesome.
That's
So
great.
no.
That's great. So right now you're still single.
Yeah, I'm in a relationship that's just kind of started.
Uh-huh.
And I stopped dating for 6 years because I noticed a pattern
Mm.
in my relationships. And I'm like, you know what? I need to do something about this because I don't want to be in a relationship that I don't feel good in. And so it took 6 years, and I did meet someone um, back in September, and it was we went for breakfast, and he told me that he can't be how did he say it? He said, I can't be um, committed at this point. He didn't live here where I do. He lived somewhere else. He said, I can't be committed. And I said, that's great because I don't even know if I want a boyfriend. And that bold honesty has really set the tone for our relationship. And nothing has been too hard to talk about. If something comes up, it's like, hey, I'm struggling with this. How can we work it out? Right? How can we make this work? And it's just been such a refreshing relationship. Like, I love it.
And that's one of your lessons learned. So what other lessons learned have you gained from this journey, from that dark journey? What have you learned?
One of the most recent things that I've learned has been belonging. I was searching for a place to belong, right? Because I didn't felt that I belonged anywhere. And what I learned about belonging is that belonging is about being accepted by yourself, and it's not about being accepted by a community, right? And so if I show up in a space, I belong there just by virtue of me showing up, of me being in that space. And that has been a huge confidence boost for me, right? I have a hard time being in front of groups of people. I get super nervous. I'm a yoga teacher, but I still, I'm up in front of a whole bunch of people and teaching yoga. And for 6 years now, I've had imposter syndrome. Like, I shouldn't be there. I'm not a good enough yoga teacher. And this realization that, just because I show up doesn't mean that I don't belong. I do belong because I'm there, right? I'm showing up for
Yeah.
myself.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, now you're a yoga instructor. What what's your next goal for the next 12 months?
The next goal is I just started my coaching practice, my somatic embodiment coaching. And that was also another huge lesson, is that, going through the talk therapy, I realized that I couldn't think my way out of the feelings that were within my body and how I was feeling. I had to feel what I was feeling within my body and work through those feelings and learn to confront the darkness, learn to process it in a way that was gentle and nice and good for my body. And so working with the body is what I love to do, right? And so the somatic coaching, building my practice there is the goal for the next 12 months, building my clientele, helping women fall into what they're feeling, because we go through life and it can be so overwhelming. And our nervous system can get triggered. We've been through trauma, we've been through abuse, and those triggers, they can overwhelm us. And how do you work through those triggers? By thinking them. You can't. You have to feel those triggers. And as you feel them in gentle ways and, going in a little bit at a time, you start to uncover the different layers, right?
Yep.
And you get to heal those layers until you get to the core of that trauma.
That trauma. What is the main core, the problem, the core reason why you're experiencing this?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
yes.
So, okay, sorry.
I was going to say, and once you get to that core, you are able to see it. You can see it with love, you see it with compassion, you see it with gentleness, and you can accept it, right? You can learn to accept that and know that even though there's this core and this hurt and this trauma, that you were not at fault. You may have experienced this, but it's made you who you are, and it's helped you get to where you are. And just acceptance, like, that in itself is one of the biggest things, right? Like, how do you accept yourself? Because I always thought, how did I let myself get into this abusive relationship? How did I let myself become the victim? And I was angry at myself, right? You're angry. And how do you accept that, right? Well, I didn't know any better, right? There were circumstances. I didn't know any better. I know now, so I can make different choices, right?
Yes, yes.
But you learn to accept that.
Yes. You mentioned about continue with your coaching practice, build your clientele. What do you think would be your major roadblock in achieving this?
That's a hard one. For years, for most of my life, actually, I know what it is. That's not a hard one. For most of my life, voicing my opinion and voicing my thoughts and just taking up space in the world has been the hardest thing for me to do, right? Because I was dismissed by my parents, I was dismissed by my husband, and so showing up and saying what I know and sharing what I know is the hardest roadblock for me.
And it boils down to fear, right?
It comes down to fear, fear that
Fear of being judged.
being judged, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Um,
Not being accepted.
not being accepted.
And yes. And that's our core problem before. Before you started, that was your problem before. And
Yeah,
then here you are, you have your goals, and then now it comes back again. Those are your roadblocks, right?
it does. But this
Uh-huh.
time I know that fear is not founded in anything, right? It's not founded in it's unfounded, right? Like there are people who want to be and listen to me. Like people show up to my yoga classes because they want to be there. They want to hear what I have to say. They want to hear how to move. People show up to the coaching practice because they know that I can help them work through what's happening. People show up to my women's circles because they know that I can help them and they want to hear, right? And so the fear of not being able to speak and voice what I have to say, yeah, it's not founded on anything. And for me to be able to overcome that is showing up.
Yes. And that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And that's great. And it takes that risk. We need to take that risk, being courageous to take that uncomfortable action. We're not
Yes.
used to it, but I know it will take us to a path where your opportunities are waiting for you.
Yes.
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 So before we end, what simple advice would you give to our listeners?
I think the simple advice that I would give to listeners is that your body holds the wisdom to help you get out of the darkness and to not be afraid of of diving into that darkness with your body, whether it's working with me or whether it's working with someone else that you're comfortable with, find someone who can help walk beside you
I
in the darkness and guide you through the darkness, right?
I
That darkness is not, it's scary to go there when you first do, but once you get there, there's always a little bit of light. And that light will help guide you, and that person beside you will help guide you. So
I
yeah,
agree with you. I always as what I've shared, no, I've learned that we have that 25-watt bulb in us. Even though it's a 25-watt bulb, there's still a spark of light that
yes,
is that is that gives out brightness in a dark room. How can we convert or change that 25-watt bulb to a 2,000-watt bulb? I don't know if there's really a 2,000-watt bulb. It's just overcoming all our fears, overcoming all our limiting beliefs, us sabotaging ourselves, us for try to try to overcome the past pains you've gone through. And I always tell others, once you that spark of light, it's your gift.
mm-hmm.
Try to discover and develop that gift so others may benefit. Don't put
Yes,
that lamp in a room, put that lamp on a lamp post so that those who are traveling in the dark may be guided
yeah,
as they travel towards their destination, and that's their dream. And
yes,
we are now the light warriors for others, so others may become light warriors as well.
yes, and be curious. Be
Mm,
curious, right?
yes.
I that's another big takeaway, is to just be curious.
Mhm.
Like,
Well, as long as we live, we continue to learn, right?
well,
We
that's
stop
right. Like,
learning when we're 6 feet underground.
yep. Then you stop being curious, right?
Yes, that's part of learning. Oh, thank you so much. Before we end, could you please share with us how can our listeners get in touch with you if they want to get in touch with
Oh, yes.
website?
So my website is called Solstice Energetics. So www.solsticeenergetics.com. And I have everything on there. I have my coaching, I have my women's circles, and I have my yoga classes.
Mhm.
And
On
so
Facebook, social
on
media.
Facebook, on social media, if you type in the self-embodied past, you'll find me on Facebook, on Instagram, on Substack, on TikTok, although I don't do much for videos because I kind of suck at those. And I'm okay with that.
Probably that's another goal you can do, right?
No, I've decided that I'm okay with not being able to do videos. I like to talk and I like to write. And
Yeah,
so
when you
that
talk, then that's your video. Record a video while you're talking, sharing it to the public, right?
we'll ease into that. But yeah, the self-embodied path, you can find me there. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, that's right. That's great. And thank you so much, Kate. It was such a wonderful discussion, a chat with you. And
Yes.
thank you for being vulnerable, for sharing your story.
You're
It
welcome.
touched me because we were on the we were on the same boat, and I know a lot of our listeners would be able to resonate as well. They could see themselves in us. And thank you for the light, the insights you have shared with us. May this light spread out so others may also share their light for others.
Yes. Thank you so much, Cynthia.
Uh-huh. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. It has been an honor to be here and chat with you and share my story with your listeners. And yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay. So thank you so much. And for our listeners, wait for our next episode. And thank you for tuning in. Bye.